Hello, guys. We are going to look at our social studies unit today. We're going to look at the region, the Midwest. So, yesterday we talked about the Northeast, which is above us, where it is usually very cold during the winter. This is where New York is, this is where Niagara Falls is. And their summers are much milder than ours are. They're not as hot as the summers that we have. Now we're going to look at the Midwest. Okay, so if you look at the compass, remember north is up here, east is over here, south is down here, and west is over here. Well, the Midwest, so meaning like in the middle, is in the center of the United States. So to the north is Canada, and none of the states in the Midwest touch an ocean. All right, so if you look at the yellow box, remember pink is where our northeast was. The yellow is the Midwest. All right, so our first stop is the Great Plains. It's beautiful landform in the Midwestern region. The land here is flat and has very few trees, but it has grass, and more grass. It's also called the prairie. So it's flat land with lots of grass. So you see on this map where it says Great Plains through here. Long ago, millions of bison called the prairie home, but over time, people hunted and killed them until they were nearly extinct. So if you look at this picture over here, this shows the bison skulls that were left after the animals were hunted in 1870. So here's some pictures of bison also. There was a lot of bison that were hunted. People today use the Great Plains for farming and wind energy. So we're going to take a look at the Great Plains and how it has changed over time.
My name is Michael Forsberg. I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska, and I am a conservation photographer. The Great Plains is a place that you can't necessarily define on a map, but it's a place that you can feel deep in your bones. It's that place where you cross into this space where the land is mostly just an anchor for the sky. It's a place where you can't open your arms wide enough to take it all in. You have canyon systems, and you have big wide braided prairie rivers, and you have big rolling hills along the Missouri, and you have badlands, and you have Sky Island mountain ranges like the Black Hills and the Bear Paws. It's an incredibly diverse landscape. When you're out there on that landscape and clear off in the distance, you can see this thin ribbon of highway with people driving back and forth that when they look out on that same landscape, you probably think to yourself that, gosh, there's nothing out there at all. And it couldn't be anything further from the truth. The very first time I photographed a burrowing owl, I was laying on my belly in a little blind that was sort of more like a coffin than anything else, and a big telephoto lens trained on this hole, waiting for this owl to come up out of its hole. And finally, right at twilight, it did. And when it did, it looked right into the camera, and that fierce look of that tiny little owl pierced my soul like nothing ever has, and probably ever will again. To get pictures of animals that you otherwise probably wouldn't be able to get a picture of. We had to create camera traps, and were able to deploy these over the landscape in different places to try mostly to get predators on film, up close and personal. And so we were able to successfully photograph mountain lions, grizzly bears, wolves, bison, and bobcats. You can stand in a tall grass prairie and not move all day, and you can look out and see all sorts of creatures that'll come your way, but you can also just look at your feet and see hundreds of species of insects and prairie rattlesnakes and other sorts of snakes and leopard frogs and toads. It's just teeming with life. So we go from small little tiger salamander up to grizzly bear. These bears that live along the Rocky Mountain front will hibernate up in the mountains, but then they'll come out onto the prairies to live most of the year. And one of the best places is a nature conservancy preserve called Pine Butte Swamp. It's a beautiful place and it's a complete ecosystem. To be able to photograph these bears with camera traps, boy, talk about a powerful experience. The Great Plains, less than 200 years ago, was one of the greatest grassland ecosystems on the face of the planet. 30 million plus bison, billions of prairie dogs, millions of belled pronghorn deer, grizzly bears, wolves, and then in the blink of an eye, that wild was gone. Gone. Over 50% of the Great Plains is in cropland. There's over 4,000 dams. Today, it's a working landscape. It helped grow a country. It helps feed a world. And today, it's increasingly being asked to fuel our energy needs. None of those things are going to go away. But I think we have great opportunity to live sustainably in this place. What I hope this book does is that I hope it starts a conversation. I hope that it puts a face to this place. None of us want our children or our children's children to know about a place that they love only in a museum or read about it in a history book. I want my kids to go out and watch cranes fall like autumn leaves against prairie sunset in the spring on the Platte River in Nebraska, or get lost in the big blue stem towers on a tallgrass prairie on an autumn day. I want that for my kids, and I want that for everybody else's, because it's just the right thing. It's our home.
Okay, so if you think about how much they've changed, how much the Great Plains have changed, one thing is the bison are almost extinct now, so there are not as many bison. There is more technology used for farming and just for living in the Great Plains. And I want you to think about what people can do to save our ecosystem or to save the Great Plains and the land and the animals that live there. Our next stop is the Great Lakes. So there are 5 Great Lakes that cross the Midwest in the Northeast region, and they form a border between the United States and Canada. So if you can remember homes, you'll remember their names. So the first one is Lake Huron, then Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Superior. So these are the largest freshwater systems of lakes in the world, and they're all connected by smaller lakes and rivers. So we're going to take a closer look at these lakes. So if you look right here, this is a far off view of the lakes. So these are very big lakes.
Get your engagement ring at jamesallen.com, because when she looks at that ring, she's gonna see you. Hey,
what's so great about the Great Lakes? They're known as America's inland seas. The North American Great Lakes, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior, are so massive that they border 8 states and contain 23 quadrillion liters of water. That's enough to cover the land area of the contiguous United States 3 meters deep. These vast bodies of water span forest, grassland, and wetland habitats, supporting a region that's home to over 3,500 species. But how did such a vast and unique geological feature come to be? The story begins near the end of the last ice age, over 10,000 years ago. a time when the climate was warming and the glaciers that cloaked the Earth's surface began their slow retreat. These immense ice sheets carved out a series of basins. Those basins filled with water as the ice began to melt, creating the world's largest area of freshwater lakes. Over time, channels developed between these basins, and water began to flow in an ongoing exchange that persists to this day. In fact, today, the interconnected Great Lakes contain almost 20% of the world's supply of fresh surface water. The water's journey begins in the far north of Lake Superior, which is the deepest, coldest, and clearest of the lakes, containing half the system's water. Lake Superior sinks to depths of 406 meters, creating a unique and diverse ecosystem that includes more than 80 fish species. A given drop of water spends on average 200 years in this lake before flowing into Lake Michigan or Lake Huron. Linked by the Straits of Mackinac, these two lakes are technically one. To the west lies Lake Michigan, the third largest of the lakes by surface area. Water slowly moves through its cul-de-sac shape and encounters the world's largest freshwater dunes, many wildlife species, and unique fossilized coral. To the east is Lake Huron, which has the longest shoreline. It's sparsely populated but heavily forested, including 7,000-year-old petrified trees. Below them, water continues to flow southeastwards, from Lake Huron into Lake Erie. This lake's status as the warmest and shallowest of the five has ensured an abundance of animal life, including millions of migrating birds. Finally, the water reaches its last stop by dramatically plunging more than 50 meters down the thundering Niagara Falls into Lake Ontario, the smallest lake by surface area. From there, some of this well-traveled water enters the St. Lawrence River, eventually reaching the Atlantic Ocean. In addition to being a natural wonder, the perpetually flowing Great Lakes bring us multiple benefits. They provide natural water filtration, flood control, and nutrient cycling. By moving water across more than 3,200 kilometers, the Great Lakes also provide drinking water for upward of 40 million people and 212 billion liters a day for the industries and farms that line their banks. But our dependence on the system is having a range of negative impacts too. The Great Lakes coastal habitats are being degraded and increasingly populated, exposing the once pristine waters to industrial, urban, and agricultural pollutants. Because less than 1% of the water leaves the lake system annually, decades-old pollutants still lurk in its waters. Humans have also inadvertently introduced more than 100 non-native and invasive species into the lakes, such as zebra and quagga mussels, and sea lampreys that have decimated some indigenous fish populations. On a larger scale, climate change is causing the waters to warm, thus reducing water levels and changing the distribution of aquatic life. Luckily, in recent years, governments have started to recognize the immense value of this natural resource. Partnerships between the United States and Canada are underway to reduce pollution, protect coastal habitats, and halt the spread of invasive species. Protecting something as massive as the Great Lakes system will require the collaboration of many organizations, but the effort is critical if we can preserve the wonder of this flowing inland sea.
Okay, so our next stop is the Mississippi River. So the Mississippi River runs between the Midwest and the Northeast regions and heads into the Southeast region. It empties into the Gulf of Mexico and is the largest river in the United States. So let's look at I don't know if it's going to let us look. So this is a look at the Mississippi River. It is about 2,340 miles long and flows through 10 different states, and it starts in Minnesota and flows to the Gulf of Mexico. So it starts up here and flows all the way down here. Many plants and animals call the Mississippi River home, and people use the river for fishing and transporting goods. So here's some pictures of the Mississippi River, some of the animals that you'll see in the plant life. All right, so these are the states that you will find in the Midwest region. We have North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And then these are the green stars are your Great Plains. So remember the flat land, also called the prairie. Then the blue is where the Mississippi River flows through this region. And then the pink stars are your 5 Great Lakes. And if you look right here, we've added Lake Ontario to the Midwest, or the Northeast. It's over here. And then we still have our other 3 spots that we learned about yesterday in the Northeast. So tomorrow we'll talk about the Southeast. Today I want you to read the passage about the Midwest and answer the questions.